How's it going, everyone? So by far, the video that I get the most questions on is about a Subaru pressure washer. It has an EA190V, or at least that's what this is, and it is having a couple problems. One, it doesn't start all the time. Two, when it does start, it's really hard to get it started. And three, even when it is started, it seems to be leaking fuel. So let's go ahead and see what's going on there. Couple things to note: there are a couple types of these pressure washers. One that has just like a, I believe that is the starter button, and which this still is, don't get me wrong, but it has like a push button instead of this little rocker with this thing on top of it. And to turn it off, sometimes there's a little switch here, which is also the choke. This method is going to be for both. It's going to look a little bit different on yours if you have this little rocker switch here, or just whatever switch that is, but it's going to be exactly the same. The only thing that's different is this has a manual choke, so keep that in mind. So if you have that machine, this is exactly the same process, just yours is going to be a little bit more entailed, and I'll tell you the difference when you get there. I'm not going to lie, when I saw this machine, I was very excited to work on it because for whatever reason, this is one of my top videos, besides a couple Honda videos and whatnot. So hopefully we have another one. Your filter might also be different. Yet again, same exact process, just it looks a tad hair different. 10mm, that's the same. Now, what you are going to want to do before we continue is to turn off the fuel. How you know the fuel is off is if the handle, because it has a line on the handle, is facing the line or facing the fuel line in the same direction, that's off. Oh yeah, excuse me, that's on. If it is going against it, that means it's off. Easier way is just to point it not in line with the fuel line. Probably should have said that in the beginning. Okay, yours might have this stuck. If it is, then don't worry about it. So this is the part that gets a little tricky. There might be a little plate that goes on here. If there is, it's going to fit into the choke. What you need to do is you need to remove the plate and take the choke. There's also going to be a cable, I believe, on the top. Don't disconnect anything. Take the little piece off and just drape it on top of the machine. But that's really the only difference. You just have to remove one additional plate. Weird random note. Tell me that this doesn't look like it's going to be in a Transformers movie with like explosions in it. Just like the weird old design it has on it. Just screams Transformer to me. Surprised there, like I said, explosions aren't coming from the back of it. Anyway, moving on. Sometimes these fuel clips are a little annoying. I'm using these little special pliers. You just have to use a pair of needle nose pliers. Now, no matter what though, if you do not have a fuel line, I thought that was going to be too big. If you don't have an extra piece of fuel line, you're going to want to be very, very careful, and you're going to want to do this. More likely than not, your pliers are just going to ruin it. See, where the base of the fuel line touches the carburetor, you take a little screwdriver, just kind of wedge it in there. Basically what's happening is it just kind of got like stuck or married or whatever you want to call it, and we're just trying to make it have a divorce. And by doing this, it kind of helps it. And once we get a little bit of it done, we can very gracefully take it and twist it. I'm just trying to break that bond. Unless someone used silicone, then you really just pretty much have to cut it off. Kind of questioning this one now. Yeah, this one I think we're just going to have to cut. It's just not wanting to come off. Yeah. it was a lost cause. This fuel line is really soft, so if it was a good fuel line, what I did right there should not have happened, or should not have cut it. But this line is sticky, it's soft, it's gross. So at this moment in time, if you are having the same issue, you do need to just replace it. However, majority of the time, this step is not needed. Your fuel line is probably just fine. Yeah, see how it's just like crumbling? This was not a good fuel line. I'm going to spend a little time and get that cleaned up. And now that we have that out, we're lucky that in the fact that these gaskets are usually pretty pliable. If this doesn't come off like it just did now, don't worry about it. We don't really have to care. We'll just leave it on the machine. It's not going to be a problem. See, the other one's going to be friendly. It is. Stayed with the machine. Yet again, if it stays on the carb, you don't have to worry about it. Now, we are going to get a little dirty here, so prepare yourself. These have little Z bends or Z bends for my Canadian friends or Australian, and we just need to pry them up. Not 100% sure where Z comes in. I always thought Z was a name of a person. Granted, not a very popular person, but a person. Anyway, we now have the reason why we're having our problem. Let's open it up. Now, I'm not usually a person to tell you what to do. It's your life, it's your business, it's your stuff. I would just highly recommend that you take a towel if your surface you're working on is not clean, and just work on a towel. Also, container. Should be a 10 millimeter. Okay, so we have a couple things in there. One, I see the trash in there, and you can kind of tell there might be a little bit of water. That's the reason why we have the cup. We want to see what exactly is in there. So in this situation, if there's trash, I'm going to take my air compressor and get this blown out, but we're going to want to do something a little different with the carb because we have a suspicion of it flooding. I blew out the bowl. It's a little stained, but it's clean. It's just what happens when you have like, technically it's a damaged bowl. So if you really wanted to, you would have to get a new bowl or a new carb. But that's not the purpose of this. In my opinion, it's going to be just fine. Take a pair of pliers. See that little pin in there? You need to be careful you don't break anything, but we need to get this out. Usually, you just kind of do something like this. Maybe the other side will have more success. I like these pliers because they're pretty even when you clamp down on them. I think we're getting somewhere. This isn't the easiest pin in the world to remove. So when this is having a problem, we need to take a hammer and be very careful. We just need to hit the pin. Like I said, you have to be very careful. If you break that post, well, yeah, you could repair it. It's going to be super hard because this aluminum, by the way, it's aluminum. It's pretty cheap. And two, it's cast. And while if you were a TIG welder, you could probably do it. But anyone who's ever welded cheap cast aluminum, it's going to tell you that it's better just to buy a new carb. It's more likely than not you're going to ruin it anyway. So we are going to look at the needle. The needle itself looks fine. It has a oh crap. It has a rubber tip on it. Like that. And I'm just going to look at it. It's hard for me to see with it being so close to the camera, but the rubber tip looks to be in good condition. That's good. We don't want it to be in bad condition because that could be a cause of a problem right there. So we know a needle is probably not our problem. Junk can get lodged in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my air compressor and blow through the inlet and see if anything comes out. I sprayed on like another towel and nothing really came out except just the fuel that was chilling in there. So we need to continue on. I have a normal Q-tip here. I'm going to take it, I'm going to squeeze the end of it, and I'm going to pull on it so I take a lot of the little swab off. Then I'm going to take a drill and put it in a chuck. The reason why we're doing this is more likely than not, unless the float is damaged, the problem we're going to have is in the needle area. And the needle, as far as we know right now, is fine. So go to your local hardware store and get something called valve grinding compound if you don't have some already. That's not necessary. What you can do is you can take carburetor cleaner. It's not as good, but it might work. In addition to that, you know that orange hand soap that has like pumice or something in it? You can also use a dab of that. Now, when I mean a dab, I mean like a dab. Not that type of dab. Like the smallest amount. And what this is going to do is we're going to kind of resurface the little area in there. I want to make sure we actually get it in. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to take probably a little bit of carburetor cleaner and spray it in there. In the meantime, I have the other side of the Q-tip. I'm going to do the exact same thing I just did. I'm going to put the dirty end into the chuck and the clean end on the outside of the chuck. There we go. See this rubber O-ring or gasket? That does not like carburetor cleaner at all. So what we need to do, there's a little bit of a piece right there. I'm going to blow it out with the air compressor. Close your ears. I'm also going to do the same for the rest of it. So what I just did is I blew through the inlet, just kind of blow everything out as I could. Now, we take our carburetor cleaner. Like I said, it doesn't like the O-ring, or the O-ring doesn't like that. Excuse me, gasket. We're going to soak this. Take a little of the excess off, because like I said, we don't want to get it on that. Okay, now I'm going to look in there, and I should not see a single bit of that compound at all. You can't see that. I'm barely going to see it, but just know that when you look at it, you need to make sure it's spotless in there. I actually did it one more time, and with the clean Q-tip with the carb cleaner, just to be sure, but now it looks almost brand new in there. It kind of resurfaces it. So now, take our pin here. Had a little bit of junk on it. At this moment, it might be a good idea to kind of scrape off some of this with a brush, so I'm going to do that right now too. Since we're here and we know it's a little hard to start, we're going to take a screwdriver and we're going to take out the center jet. That's not a big enough screwdriver. So with this, you need to find one that's the perfect size. So if you get one that's too small, it's just going to strip it out, and then you're just going to cause another problem. That one, I know from experience, is the perfect size, but it's also not a technical screwdriver. But here we go. Oh, well, it is really stuck in there. We're going to take a little WD-40, just going to spray it in there. Hopefully that loosens it up a little bit. No, that's not loosening up at all. So at this point in time, I'm going to put this in the vise with 2 rubber pieces on the side so it doesn't mar the surface. I'm going to press down really hard and hopefully it comes out. So unfortunately it is stuck in there like real bad. And basically what I did is I took a wire from a wire brush. You can see the actual jet in there. It has a little tiny hole. Took a relatively thick wire. I mean, it's from a wire brush, so it's still pretty thin. It's still smaller than a hole. I just went through there. It didn't seem like it was clogged. Yours, you should be able to pull out, but this one, it's stuck. It happens from time to time. I wouldn't worry too much about it. I mean, technically, ideally, we would be doing that, but can't win them all. Now, let's go ahead and put that float back on. And I think a lot of the problem with it getting started isn't the fact it wasn't getting fuel. I think it was getting too much fuel, because this doesn't have a drop of fuel in it, I think. I only turned off the fuel for filming purposes, but let me just double check that. It doesn't look like there's a single drop of fuel in there. No, there's not. So it had already kind of overflowed. For the person that gave it to me actually had fuel in the bed of his truck. So I checked the oil, which is something you should do too if you're having an overflow problem. 'Cause a lot of times the oil will actually be diluted by the fuel, and then when that happens you just have a bad situation on your hands, engine wear and whatnot. So if you ever have a carb that's flooding or overflowing, make sure you smell the fuel, smell the oil. And just to be on the safe side, it wouldn't be a horrible idea to actually just replace it, which I'll probably do at the end of this. Now, we're going to put the bowl back on. You should do this, by the way. Use a wrench. I just don't have one. Now, when I'm blowing in here, right now I should hear air go inside the bowl. You'll hear it. And I flip it over upside down. I should do the same thing, but I should not hear air. Yeah, no, I don't hear anything. So, I'm going to replace the fuel line. Just take the line that came off of it, get one that's the same size, and just replace it. Go to your local hardware store, usually the small little mom pop shops that kind of sell everything by the foot, even though they're like 10 times more expensive than what they should be, because you're buying it in such a small quantity. It's, you know, it is what it is. Go there. They usually have excess amount of fuel line, but yeah, that one just actually came right off. So there's definitely, this line is not that good. Kind of feels a little cheap to begin with, but anyway, I'm gonna get one that's cut to about yay big, and then put it back on. Take the clamps off this one, of course, and put it on the new piece. Put the carb back on. It goes on exactly the same way, except I'm gonna bring it back to kind of show you if you have that additional plate. Inevitably, I'm gonna hear a comment, so I'm just gonna go over it now. The linkage for the throttle, not the choke. If you have the choke, we have the throttle, and if you don't know where that is, there's a little arm that's on this that goes, that the linkage, the little line or the wire goes to this little metal arm that moves. That is your linkage or your throttle. You need to put it in the hole that's closest to here. Now, if for any reason yours is minorly different and you see the excess amount of wear on the outside one, I don't think you should. I've never seen it that way, to be honest, but the second hole is actually for your spring. So it shouldn't matter too much if you get it wrong, but you shouldn't, because it can change the RPM, and this machine's kind of meant to run at a certain RPM. And the perfect thing just happened. So I put this on there. Now, don't mind this. See how this is super hard to move? That's not good. If we were to ignore that, then we're gonna have a problem. Now let me show you why. Remember that little arm I was showing you earlier or talking about? The linkage came out of it. At least not all the way. See? That's how it's supposed to be. Now, looking back at the carb, moves nice and free. So that's something that's important. When you put stuff like this back on, you don't want to have anything jamming. There's lots of reasons to have a good jam, but this is not one of them. Okay, so now it's installed. Everything moves freely. Now if yours has that little bracket on here, take it down, undrape it, put it back on, and what you're going to want to do is come over to the side, or at least be able to see through. And then when you go to choke, you should see the choke go like this, close, when it actually says choke. And when you go to run, what you should see is that. And if you don't, then you have a problem. There should be a little piece of metal that goes through one of the holes on the linkage. Put it through there, kind of hold it down with your hand and move it. Maybe if it's too much tension, then put like a nut on there just to hold it in place for the time being, and then move it back and forth. In addition to that, when you put your fuel line clips back on, you want to make sure that they're not facing out, because sometimes, I don't think this machine's going to have too much of a problem with it, but you want to have either facing down or towards the machine, because sometimes what will happen is the little bracket might get caught on it, and it's just not a good thing. So put your little piece on, move it back and forth, and as long as the choke turns on, then you're fine. Make sure no wires are disconnected. If you draped it correctly, sometimes you can't. You might have to drape it on the side. Majority of the time I've always just put it on the top, because that's where the actual kill switch is, or the kill wire for the coil, so you have more slack if you put it up top. So right now I'm going to put the cover back on. You've seen that before, and I don't think I mentioned it, but these little sleeves, they just sometimes fall out of the plastic cover. That's normal. I don't, if you have that happen, don't worry about it. You just slip them back on and that's it. So I'm going to turn the fuel on right now. I put a little bit of fuel while I was cutting the fuel line, and we're going to see if it, actually there's nothing there. So I think the fuel line might be a little bit too big. So I'm going to grab a different fuel line. So here's the annoying part. The fuel line fits perfectly right here, obviously. Not so good right there. So there are two different diameters. It's kind of a pain. Some machines do this. So you're going to want to get the one that obviously fits the smaller one and just kind of manhandle it on the other side. It's annoying, but it's something you have to do on time to time. Got a smaller line. It barely fits on this. It's pretty tight, and this one fits just fine. And so far it seems to be doing good. I'm going to let it sit there for about 5 minutes while I put the cover on. I'm just going to fill the bottom. So far it's dry. If the fuel is going to leak, it's going to leak and go to the bottom of the bowl nut first. If you feel fuel right here, but you don't see anything coming out of the throat or the side of the line, it very well could actually just be the bowl nut. But if you see fuel like slowly seeping out, that's a problem. So keep an eye on it and just kind of wait like 5 minutes. If you don't see anything in 5 minutes, you're probably okay. A leak might develop if it's something really slow, but more likely than not, if you did everything we did today, you probably fixed it. And we've been waiting for about 5 minutes, a little longer, and it's good. I wish I would have paid attention to what was choke. I think that's choke, yeah. Run or wait. No. There we go. Probably should move this out of the way. There we go. The switch is set to I'm gonna say, oh, okay, that's the start, but the battery's dead, so it doesn't matter. Okay. Oh. Yeah, there we go. Started on the first pull. I'm going to look at it for leaks. I'm going to connect a hose line to it and probably use it a bit. That's just kind of boring. So if it does have a problem, I'll bring it back. But so far, we're doing pretty good. So I think we're pretty good. If you're having this problem than before, then, you know, do what we did before right now, and hopefully it should be taken care of. So it's not that hard. You'll need basic tools, and that's it. If for any reason you can't or don't feel like this is your cup of tea or your forte, whatever English term you want to go through, or I guess forte is not English, but you get my drift. Go to Amazon, Google, ereplacementparts.com, or whatever you want to use, and just type in EA190V carburetor or parts diagram. You need to find the right one that you have though. If you have the one that you have the manual choke like this one, get the right carb. They usually have pictures. Look at the pictures very thoroughly. Take the carburetor off, or at least the cover off, so you have a good view of it, and make sure you're getting the right one. Worst thing you could do is buy one and it's for the wrong version. So don't do that. And then at that point you just put it on, and you can get rid of all whatever minutes this was in the opening of the carb and looking at it. Pretty simple. A little more expensive right now technically. If it wasn't for the fuel line, I think I would have $0 in it, or maybe a little brake cleaner and stuff. Let's say $1, and that's it to fix this. $1 with the fuel line, everything else. Even if I paid way too much for the fuel line, probably $3 in it right now, and it starts. I don't have to buy a new pressure washer. I'm gonna leave you at that. Follow me on Instagram at smallengine101. If I could see you, keep watching, subscribe. I'm gonna make a video right after this explaining a couple other reasons why your machine isn't gonna start. It's not gonna be as entailed as this, but it's gonna give you a couple other options, and I'll give you some helpful tips along the way. So watch that one if you need to. But other than that, I'll catch you in the next video. You have a good night.